A brief and profane treatise on the preposterous business of being alive. 1. The preposterous animal. By God's blistered arse, Christ's misplaced sandals, and the sulphurous fucking bollocks of Beelzebub, what cockeyed, piss-soaked, shit-splattered pageant of buggeration is this mortal existence? What lunatic designed the human being? Here comes man, 5 or 6 feet of anxious meat, balanced precariously upon 2 legs, crowned with a few pounds of electrified porridge, capable of contemplating eternity, composing fugues, proving mathematical theorems, remembering childhood, anticipating death, inventing gods, doubting gods, overthrowing gods, and asking why there is something rather than nothing. Then, halfway through the inquiry, he has to piss. This should trouble us more than it does. For 3,000 years, philosophers have been poncing about in sandals, robes, wigs, cassocks, academic gowns, and other ceremonial philosophical knickknackery, announcing the discovery of being, form, substance, spirit, the absolute, the monad, the will, the thing in itself, the dialectical unfolding of history, the eternal recurrence, the ground of being, and every other grand metaphysical cockalorum ever extracted from the constipated arsehole of abstraction. Meanwhile, the philosopher himself has piles. Zounds. There is metaphysics, there is anthropology, and then there is the anus. The anus is the great cynic philosopher of the body. It respects no system. It grants no tenure. It has never read Plato and does not give one solitary rat's fart for your fucking ontology. Man says, I am an immortal soul. The anus says, you ate curry. Argument concluded. God's wounds. What an animal. We are not merely beasts. That would have been easy. A horse does not awaken at 4 a.m, tortured by the suspicion that it has betrayed its authentic potential. A badger has never experienced imposter syndrome. No pig, despite possessing considerable intelligence and a commendable appreciation of mud, has founded a philosophical society devoted to determining whether pig consciousness participates in the absolute. And no goose, despite being a feathered asshole with the temperament of a provincial tyrant, has written a memoir. Man alone can ruin a perfectly decent afternoon by remembering that he exists. Cosmic jackanapes, stargazing shit machines. We emerge naked, screaming and covered in fluids from between somebody's legs. We immediately begin shitting ourselves. After several years, we learn not to shit ourselves and are praised for this achievement. Then we spend decades acquiring opinions, furniture, qualifications, lovers, enemies, passwords, cholesterol, and increasingly specific preferences concerning coffee. Eventually, some of us begin shitting ourselves again. Between these 2 epochs of involuntary defecation, we demand dignity. Fucking magnificent. Every whey-faced jackanapes, scoundrel blackguard, tosspot, shitheel, gobshite, fuckwit, pissant, arsewipe, bastard, Burke, prat, pillock, knobhead, bellend, numpty, douchebag, dipshit, dickhead, shitbird, turd gargler, fart catcher, horse's arse and congenital son of a bitch, comes squelching forth from the cosmic cunt of creation, with scarcely enough wit to distinguish his elbow from his asshole, yet presently crowns himself philosopher king, and begins pontificating upon the proper, fucking management of the universe. There he stands, the human being. He cannot find his keys. He has opinions about Syria. He cannot remember the password to his banking application. He has solved the moral problem of civilization. He has accidentally worn mismatched socks. He understands history. What weapons-grade fuckery. Yet ridicule alone will not do, because this same ridiculous animal painted Lascaux. It buried its dead beneath flowers. It discovered prime numbers. It built Chartres. It wrote King Lear and the B minor Mass. It calculated the age of stars whose light began traveling before our species existed. There is the fucking difficulty. Man is ridiculous because he is almost sublime, and sublime because he never quite succeeds in ceasing to be ridiculous. A creature capable of contemplating infinity while desperately clenching its arse cheeks on a delayed train is not merely absurd. It is magnificently absurd. Give an ape Shakespeare, mortality, sexual jealousy, compound interest, hemorrhoids, Mozart, bureaucratic paperwork, and the knowledge that every person it loves will die. Then listen to the bastard sing. 2. The Great Human Bullshit Machine. Having established that man is an animal ridiculous enough to contemplate eternity while taking a shit, we must now acknowledge his second, and perhaps more astonishing accomplishment. He makes things up, and then gets bossed around by them. Money, nations, titles, corporations, prestige, property, credit ratings, dress codes, diplomatic protocol, university degrees, royal succession, parking permits, the fucking Tuesday deadline. None of these things grows upon trees. There is no wild population of mortgages grazing peacefully upon the Serengeti. No naturalist has ever discovered a flock of limited liability companies nesting in the upper Amazon. No archaeologist has excavated a naturally occurring assistant deputy undersecretary for regional strategic affairs. A wolf can imagine where the deer went. Man can collectively hallucinate an invisible entity, write rules concerning it, build a marble fucking building in its honor, appoint 12,000 people to administer it, levy taxes to maintain them, compose an anthem about the whole arrangement, and eventually imprison you for failing to complete page 6 correctly. That is civilization. Not bullshit exactly. Something far more interesting. Bullshit that has acquired causal power. Take money. Money is fucking extraordinary. You walk into a bakery carrying a rectangle of paper bearing the portrait of a dead politician. You hand it to a woman. She gives you bread. Nobody screams. Nobody summons a psychiatrist. Try the same procedure with a maple leaf upon which you have drawn Charlemagne. But my leaf represents $20. No, it doesn't. Why not? Because nobody agrees that it does. There you have it. Money is real because everybody agrees to behave as though it is real, which sounds like horseshit until you have none. Then the horseshit becomes remarkably concrete. The landlord accepts the hallucination. The grocer accepts the hallucination. The bank records the hallucination to 7 decimal places. Fail to possess sufficient quantities of the hallucination, and some very tangible bastard changes the locks. There is the earth. Grass, trees, perhaps a river, some cows. Nowhere upon the landscape does nature herself announce, "France ends here, you fuckwit." The molecules have not been informed. A beetle crosses the frontier without presenting documentation. A cloud enters Belgian airspace with breathtaking contempt for international law. The river, that anarchist bitch, flows across 3 jurisdictions without applying for a visa. But you try it without a passport. Suddenly, the imaginary line acquires uniforms, papers. I was under the impression that the Earth was one continuous planetary body. Very interesting, sir. Papers. But observe that sparrow. The little blackguard has just entered your sovereign territory without authorization. Sir, arrest the fucking sparrow. And yet borders cannot simply be dismissed as nonsense. They organize laws, obligations, communities, and belonging. People have killed for them. People have died crossing them. The line is imaginary. The bullet is not. That is the peculiar genius and horror of human symbolism. We draw something in the air and then bleed upon it. Consider aristocracy. A baby emerges from a vagina. He is accomplished fuck all. He cannot control his own neck. Nevertheless, this incontinent potato is now the Earl of Wessex, Baron Fuckingham, keeper of the royal ferrets, and hereditary possessor of 14,000 acres because 8 centuries ago, one of his ancestors was particularly effective at hitting Frenchmen with an axe. Everybody bows. That is the interesting part, not the title. The bow. Why the fuck are you bowing? Because everyone else is bowing. Because your father bowed. Because his father bowed. Because there are portraits on the walls of people bowing. Because failure to bow makes everybody present feel that something real has been violated. And perhaps it has. Custom is imaginary right up until you break it. Then you discover its teeth. Prestige works the same way. Take 2 leather handbags. Place one in a market stall for $40. Place the other beneath theatrical lighting on a marble pedestal in Paris. Stamp an aristocratic surname upon it and charge $4,000. Suddenly, one carries meaning. The leather has undergone no spiritual transformation. No angel descended from heaven and breathed luxury into the fucking zipper. The transformation occurred inside human heads. But once it occurs, people behave differently around the object. The handbag becomes a social sentence. The restaurant reservation. Man discovered symbols and immediately began peacocking with the fuckers. Even rebellion becomes symbolic. The aristocrat wears silk to distinguish himself from the laborer. The punk tears his clothes to distinguish himself from the aristocrat. The wealthy bohemian spends $600 achieving the appearance of someone who sleeps behind a railway station. The billionaire wears the same gray t-shirt every day, so everybody understands that he has transcended the need to demonstrate wealth, which is itself an extremely expensive way of demonstrating wealth. The ape wants to signify, observe my feathers. Observe my refusal to wear feathers. Observe how little I care whether you observe me. Are you observing? And then comes respectability. The rake is disreputable because he drinks, gambles, and fornicates. The gentleman drinks better liquor, gambles larger sums, and fornicates behind heavier curtains. The whore is condemned for selling what respectable society spends an astonishing proportion of its time trying to obtain for free. The bawd is vulgar because she discusses the transaction openly. The respectable whoremonger enters through the rear door because his principal moral objection to vice is being seen participating in it. Fie upon that painted Jezebel. Yes, Reverend. Disgusting strumpet. Indeed, Reverend. Scarlet woman. Quite. The libertine calls appetite philosophy. The miser calls avarice prudence. The coward calls fear discretion. The bully calls cruelty honesty. The politician calls ambition service. The gossip calls malice concern. The pompous prick calls vanity standards. And the man who spends every waking hour accumulating money announces that money has never particularly interested him. By the sweating arse of mammon, at least the whore names her price. Human beings possess a staggering capacity to translate appetite into principle. This is where bullshit proper enters. A lie knows it is lying. Bullshit is more dangerous. Bullshit has forgotten. The bullshitter frequently performs his finest work upon himself. He wants the promotion because he deserves greater responsibility. He wants revenge because justice demands closure. He wants everybody to obey him because somebody must provide leadership. He wants applause because his message needs amplification. He wants to be seen as humble because humility is terribly fucking important to him. the bastard may believe every word. Sincerity can be bullshit's finest tailoring, and private bullshit, being a sociable creature, seeks company. One man believes something stupid, harmless enough. 2 men agree. Now we have a movement. 20 million agree. We have flags. Soon someone writes an anthem. Someone else designs a uniform. A committee forms. There are minutes. There are subcommittees. Some pissant proposes an amendment to paragraph 4. 6 months later, people who originally gathered to abolish bureaucracy are arguing over whether the anti-bureaucracy working group possesses constitutional authority to recognize the Interim Committee for Procedural Simplification. Thus does rebellion discover stationary. And then, inevitably, the form. The form is the final apotheosis of symbolic civilization. Nobody wanted the form. Somewhere, long ago, there was merely a problem. We should probably keep track of these goats. Reasonable. Someone made a list. Excellent. Then someone noticed that the goat list lacked consistency. Standards were introduced. A goat registration office became necessary. Then an Office of Goat Registration Oversight. Then regional goat compliance authorities. Eventually, a man wishing to purchase one fucking goat is informed that his application cannot be processed because he submitted Form G-12 rather than G-12B, which applies to goats intended for mixed residential agricultural use. I would like to buy it. Certainly. So may I? Not without authorization. From whom? The Department of Caprine Affairs. Where are they? They closed in 2019. Then who issues the authorization? We do. Excellent. Issue it. We cannot. Why? You require approval from the Department of Caprine Affairs. Here, Kafka quietly enters the room and begins masturbating. This is the moment the invented world becomes autonomous. Nobody controls the machine. Everyone merely works for it. The clerk is not your enemy. The clerk is also fucked. He has a supervisor. The supervisor has a policy. The policy has a statutory basis. The statute has regulations. The regulations were revised pursuant to a judgment nobody present has fucking read. Somewhere above the entire edifice sits a minister who, when asked why any of this happens, replies, "That is an operational matter. Nobody hates you. Nobody persecutes you. Nobody has even made a decision. Your application is simply pending for eternity." There is something almost theological about bureaucracy. An invisible authority governs your fate according to laws you cannot fully know. Intermediaries interpret those laws. You submit petitions. You wait. Occasionally, a message arrives. Documentation insufficient. You ask what documentation would be sufficient. No reply. Medieval man at least knew which fucking saint to pray to. But here the cynic must be careful. Because civilization is not merely horseshit. The symbolic world also performs miracles. Contracts allow strangers to trust one another. Money lets the baker sell bread without demanding 3 chickens and a fucking turnip. Institutions preserve knowledge beyond individual lifetimes. Law can become a labyrinth, but law also means the strongest bastard cannot always simply take your house. We make imaginary things real enough to coordinate millions of strangers. That is astonishing. The trouble begins when we forget that we fucking made them. Money becomes worth. The symbol becomes master. Perhaps this is why the cynic remains necessary. Not because everything is false. That is adolescent bollocks. The cynic walks through the grand symbolic cathedral of civilization, taps the pillars and asks, "Is this one holding up the roof, or are we all just fucking bowing to it?" That is why laughter remains dangerous. Laughter breaks the spell. For 1 second, the crown becomes a hat. The fortune becomes numbers. The prestigious title becomes words printed beneath somebody's name. The sacred procedure becomes something some long-dead bureaucratic tosspot once typed into a memorandum. The thing need not be destroyed. It merely needs to become visible again. And through that little crack in the enchantment comes the question civilization fears more than almost any other. Hang on, why the fuck are we doing this? 3. Love, lust, whores, and other catastrophes. Unfortunately, not everything bossing man around was invented by man. Nature, apparently dissatisfied with death, hunger, and metaphysical uncertainty, also equipped the philosophical ape with genitals. By the sweating tits of Aphrodite. What a decision. Here is a creature already struggling to understand consciousness, morality, and the cosmos. And suddenly, an attractive stranger walks past, and the entire philosophical enterprise goes straight out the fucking window. A pair of eyes, a mouth, a voice, the curve of somebody's neck, some peculiar gesture of the hands. Eros is metaphysics with an erection. The old vocabulary understood the carnival better than ours. There goes the rake, perfumed and predatory. The roe, elegantly ruined. The libertine, who has converted his inability to keep his trousers buttoned into a philosophical doctrine. The lecher, the fornicator, the debauchee, the satyr, the whoremonger, the pander, the pimp, the procurer, and skulking around the corner comes some pox-rattled, whore-bothering, ale-sodden son of a drunken bawd who has spent the evening preaching chastity and the night trying to remember which fucking window belongs to the doxy. The old city had its stews, its bawdy houses, its taverns, its houses of ill repute. There were harlots and strumpets, trollops and tarts, bawds and doxies, drabs and trolls, wenches and wantons, courtesans and scarlet women, painted Jezebels and poor unfortunate whores upon whom respectable society projected half its lust and all its fucking hypocrisy. The preacher thundered, "Whore!" then slipped out after dark to visit her. There is humanity condensed into one street. Public virtue upstairs, private appetite downstairs. The same pompous bastard who denounces the strumpet spends half his imagination wondering what she looks like without her dress. Lust mutates. The whoremonger falls in love. The rake becomes faithful. The libertine meets somebody whose absence hurts. You desire a body. Then somehow you begin caring about the person who wakes inside it. Their headache matters. Their childhood matters. Their ridiculous stories matter. You remember how they take their coffee. You learn what frightens them. You begin wanting their happiness even when it produces no immediate advantage to you. Their absence alters the fucking geometry of a room. Now you are truly screwed. The rake can swagger through every bawdy house from London to Constantinople, bedding willing strumpets, doxies, courtesans, and painted Jezebels until his cock requires diplomatic representation. Yet one morning, some ordinary woman laughs at him in precisely the right way, and the poor bastard discovers vulnerability. There goes his sovereignty. Splendid. Sovereignty was overrated. Love is the catastrophic discovery that another person has acquired veto power over your emotional weather. One message can make the day. One silence can poison it. Jealousy appears, that horned old gobshite, carrying a magnifying glass. A glance becomes evidence. A pause becomes conspiracy. A delayed reply becomes an indictment. Some poor fuckwit spends 6 hours interpreting punctuation because the woman he adores wrote sure rather than sure, and yet who would abolish this? Who would trade the possibility of heartbreak for perfect immunity? Only someone who has confused safety with life. A locked tavern never has a brawl. It never has music either. 4. The body collects its fucking debt. Eventually, the joke changes. Youth allows us to imagine the body as an obedient servant. Then the servant unionizes. The knee develops grievances. The back becomes a blackguard. The stomach acquires veto power. Sleep, formerly an automatic process requiring no greater philosophical sophistication than lying the fuck down, becomes a negotiation. Hair deserts the head and establishes colonial settlements in the ears. Teeth begin sending invoices. The prostate, that obscure walnut of destiny, enters public affairs. You injure yourself sleeping. Sleeping. Once you could fall drunk from a wall, wake in a ditch, eat a sausage, and continue with your day. Now you turn your neck incorrectly while examining a lamp and require physiotherapy. Buggeration. The body keeps accounts. Every rakehell, whore, saint, sailor, king, courtesan, bishop, pimp, philosopher, tart, banker, gutter snipe, poet, doxy, blackguard, and magnificent bastard eventually receives the same memorandum. Regarding your lease on the flesh, the landlord intends to renovate. This is where laughter begins losing some of its protection. Illness is funny, until it hurts enough. And suddenly the entire fucking vocabulary of insult seems too small. A person existed. Now they do not. The world has committed an obscenity greater than any word we possess. And the bastard world continues. Kettles boil. Traffic moves. A shitbird argues about parking. Some knobhead complains that his coffee is cold. A douchebag sends a marketing email. Some whoremongering politician lies on television. A pigeon shits on a statue. The sun rises exactly on schedule. And the dead remain dead. What a godforsaken arrangement. Here, profanity ceases being decoration. Sometimes, fuck is the most honest prayer available. Fuck cancer. Fuck the accident. Fuck the midnight telephone call. Fuck the hospital corridor. Fuck the diagnosis. Fuck the clock. Fuck the empty bedroom. Fuck the ordinary Tuesday afternoon on which someone indispensable ceased to exist. Fuck every sanctimonious cunt who explains grief too quickly. Fuck every philosophy that turned somebody else's death into a neat little fucking lesson. No. But necessity does not negotiate. Death has heard better curses. It took Achilles. It took Socrates. It took Caesar. It took Shakespeare with unwritten plays still inside him. It took Mozart with music unwritten. It took nameless whores in alleys, kings beneath canopies, infants in cradles, soldiers in mud, old women in clean beds, drunkards beneath tables, saints at prayer, and bastards who deserved another chance. It took people whose deaths altered civilizations. It took people whose deaths were noticed by 5 others. Death does not distinguish between a motherfucking emperor and a pissant. And there is something terrifyingly clean about that. The billionaire's corpse owns exactly as much of tomorrow as the beggar's. Nothing. Yet perhaps mortality does something to value, not by making death good. Fuck that pious horseshit. Death is not secretly our benevolent spiritual instructor. The bastard deserves no thank you card. But finitude gives contour. An immortal afternoon can always be repeated. This afternoon cannot. The kiss matters partly because mouths decay. The conversation matters because voices stop. The summer evening matters because there will be a final summer evening, and every ordinary encounter with someone you love occurs beneath a sentence nobody likes reading. Limited availability. Perhaps it ought to wake us up too. 5. The last fucking tavern. So let us end where all respectable philosophy ought eventually to end, in a tavern. Not heaven, too tidy. Not hell, too administratively committed. A tavern at the ragged edge of eternity. An impossible, smoke-blackened, piss-stained, candle-lit body house of being whose windows open upon the stars. Everyone is there. Socrates has cornered an accountant and is asking increasingly infuriating questions about depreciation. Diogenes sits beside the hearth, telling emperors to fuck off. Alexander has finally learned to laugh about the sunlight incident. Shakespeare is scribbling knob jokes on a napkin while stealing dialogue from a whore, a sailor, and a bishop. Rabelais has ordered another barrel. Montaigne watches the whole motherfucking shit show with amused affection. Nietzsche is challenging God to arm wrestle. A medieval monk is drunk. A Victorian bishop is drunker. A pox-rattled whoremonger is attempting to seduce a duchess. The duchess has already stolen his purse. Some scarlet woman from Southwark has beaten Louis XIV at cards and is calling him a cheating French bellend. A rake and a nun are arguing about free will. A bawd is explaining economics to Adam Smith. A sailor has taught St. Augustine 3 new uses of the word fuck. The tavern roars. There are whores and harlots, trollops and strumpets, doxies and drabs, trolls, tarts, wenches, jades, wantons, courtesans, painted Jezebels and scarlet women, sitting beside the respectable men who once paid them privately and condemned them publicly. There are pimps, panders, procurers, rakes, roués, libertines, lechers, fornicators, debauchees, cuckolds, pricks, assholes, bastards, shitbirds, blackguards, tosspots, fuckwits, gutter snipes, and one spectacularly drunken horse's arse who keeps insisting he wants new Napoleon. Nobody is pretending anymore. That is the important part. The masks are stacked beside the door. Kings drink with peasants. Saints discover that sailors know excellent songs. Whores discover that saints know a few too. Heroes admit they were frightened. Cowards confess the one afternoon on which they were brave. The rake admits whom he actually loved. The whore remembers the customer who treated her kindly. The emperor remembers being a child. The executioner remembers every face. The billionaire discovers nobody gives a fuck what his net worth was. The obscure discover eternity has no guest list. Some nameless medieval bastard beneath the table is singing a filthy ballad about the bishop's arse. Eventually the bishop joins in. What remains to defend? Across the room sit the people who considered themselves failures. The business collapsed. The marriage ended. The masterpiece remained unfinished. The journey was abandoned. The great love went unconfessed. The whore never escaped the stews. The rake never became respectable. The father failed the son. The son disappointed the father. The woman wasted 15 years loving a bastard. The bastard realized at 63 that he had indeed been a bastard. The coward missed his moment. The lover arrived too late. They sit among conquerors. The difference seems less impressive now. Perhaps a life cannot finally be totaled like an account book. Perhaps existence is not a fucking examination for which the dead receive grades. Perhaps the demand that one's life become impressive is merely the great human bullshit machine continuing to grind away inside the skull. You were here. Start there. For a few decades, matter performed an outrageous trick and became you. The universe acquired your particular pair of eyes. It developed your ridiculous laugh. It worried your stupid worries. It lusted your lusts. It fucked your fuck-ups. It suffered your heartbreaks. Through you, existence tasted coffee, got drunk, missed trains, filled out forms, desired inappropriate people, lost arguments, told lies, apologized badly, heard rain against windows, touched another body, buried its dead, watched winter become spring, and wondered what the fuck any of it meant. Perhaps that is insufficient. Perhaps everything is insufficient. But it is not nothing. Then the bell rings. The room quiets. Behind the counter stands death. Not a skeleton, not a demon, just the landlord. Old, patient, impossible to bribe. He has listened to our bullshit all evening. Last orders, you bastards! The tavern groans. Already? Cries a piss-soaked tosspot. Yes! But I haven't fucking finished. Death looks around the room. No one has. And there it is. The philosopher had another book. The whore had somewhere she wanted to see. The rake had finally found somebody worth remaining faithful to. The mother wanted another Christmas. The sailor wanted one more sea. The coward wanted another chance to be brave. The old bastard wanted one more spring. The lover wanted one more morning. The child wanted everything. Nobody is fucking finished. That may be the final fellowship. So what is wisdom? Not purity. We tried that and produced inquisitors, hypocrites, and generations of furtive whoremongers. Not prestige. Death cannot read business cards. Not wealth. The landlord does not accept fucking American Express. Not invulnerability. That merely purchases loneliness at extortionate rates. Not the extermination of appetite, foolishness, lust, grief, contradiction, and laughter, until one resembles some polished spiritual fucknugget floating 3 inches above ordinary humanity. Bollocks. Perhaps wisdom begins by refusing the lie that dignity requires us to cease being ridiculous. Perhaps the wise creature knows himself as animal and angel, bowel and imagination, cock and conscience, cunt and cosmos, appetite and elegy, shit and starlight inconveniently bundled into one temporary sack of skin. He distrusts certainty. He laughs when fortune steals his trousers. He says, "I was wrong," before death has to explain it to him. He loves people while they are still inconveniently fucking alive. He drinks the wine. He occasionally tells the pompous cockalorum to move out of his sunlight. He knows the difference between cynicism and wisdom, because the man who announces that everything is bullshit has merely discovered the laziest possible form of bullshit. He knows roses do not become less beautiful because manure exists. Indeed, the roses seem to have entered into a rather productive arrangement with the shit. There is the secret, if there is one. Not transcendence away from the muck. Grandeur through the fucking muck. The cathedral needs gargoyles. Tragedy needs the fool. Love needs the possibility of humiliation. Courage needs fear. The feast matters because eventually the landlord calls time. And consciousness, this improbable candle burning briefly inside a rutting ape, becomes more astonishing rather than less when we remember what a ridiculous fucking ape it is. So drink your wine, you scabrous rapscallion. Kiss whom you love, make the thing, take the journey. Say the dangerous sentence, read the difficult book, sing badly, fuck magnificently when fortune and mutual inclination permit. Forgive where forgiveness deserves to exist. Tell the whoremongering blackguard to go fuck himself when that is the appropriate philosophical response. Keep one eye upon eternity, and the other upon where you left your fucking spectacles. Distrust any worldview too dignified to accommodate diarrhea. Laugh at your own bullshit before some gutter snipe has to do it for you. And when fortune, that capricious old trollop, kicks you square in the bollocks, when fate steals your trousers, when Eros turns you into a lovesick prick, when bureaucracy demands Form 17B in triplicate, When nature hands you roses, erections, thunderstorms, hemorrhoids, orgasms, bereavements, intestinal worms, sunsets and geese without furnishing one solitary rat's fart of an explanation, do not conclude too quickly that the absurdity has disproved the wonder. Perhaps the absurdity is braided through the fucking wonder. Eventually, the black-cloaked landlord looks your way. Naturally, the glass still contains a mouthful. Naturally, the conversation has just become interesting. Naturally, someone you love is still sitting beside you. That is how closing time works, you poor bastard. Put down the glass. Slap whatever coins remain upon the counter. Look once around that impossible tavern at the saints and whores, the heroes and cowards, the rakes and virgins, the pimps and philosophers, the sailors and accountants, the kings and shitbirds, the mothers, murderers, mystics, dickheads, children, poets, painted Jezebels, broken-hearted lovers, and bewildered philosophizing apes who shared this brief roaring evening with you. Perhaps laugh, perhaps fucking weep. There is no rule against doing both. Then salute the whole glorious, doomed, whore-haunted, piss-taking, farting, fucking, praying, grieving, singing company and say, "Zounds, God's wounds, s'blood, odds fucking bodykins. By God's blistered arse, Christ's missing breeches, the devil's hairy scrotum, and the sulphurous bollocks of Beelzebub. What an obscene arrangement this was. What a heartbreaking shitshow. What a whorehouse. What a cathedral. What a cockamamie, bollock-shattering, arse-backwards, piss-soaked, star-spangled fucking catastrophe. I understood almost none of it. I believed some magnificent horseshit. I behaved like a cunt on occasion. I made a proper fucking mess of parts. I was frightened when I should have been brave and brave occasionally by accident. I lusted after fools. I ignored wisdom. I lost things. I found things too late. I loved some people badly, and some people desperately. I would have liked another round. But by every whore, saint, bastard, fool, and blazing star that ever illuminated this god-forsaken cosmic body house, what a motherfucking privilege it was.